I doubt many will want to listen to this video, but I honestly felt compelled to make it. No, this is not a cry for help, nor is it me announcing anything dark. Actually, it's a deep dive into the creation and development of the character who I built and feel the most attached to in my entire writing career, Death. The only character whose story I published, and the only character who I will honestly say I lost myself in. So this is me contemplating death. Death and I had a weird start to our relationship. It began with a sermon at church when I was just a little kid. I remember my pastor was talking on death as we understood it from the Bible, and he brought up the plague of the firstborn on Egypt in the book of Exodus. I asked my dad after the sermon if there really was an angel of death, and he said that there could be, but it could also just be that angels are given authority to bring death. But I remember thinking to myself at the time, that's gotta be really sad if your only job is to bring death to people. I think I said that out loud, but Dad didn't laugh, he just nodded his head. So from the time I was a kid, I had a weird connection to the angel of death, as I was already thinking about how sad and lonely he must be doing his job. Later on, a good friend of mine passed away due to cancer. I was heartbroken and I cried, and that was when I actually better understood the weight of death, and it didn't feel good. It hurt, and I hated it. And after that, I grew an intense fear of death. I learned about cancers, diseases, poisons, dangerous accidents. I learned that there were many, many ways to die, and I wanted to avoid them all. I wanted my family to avoid them all. I grew somewhat paranoid. Eventually, my parents, and my pastor too, came to think of it, had to help me work through that irrational fear. I don't remember if it was my mom or dad who said it, but I remember one of them saying, you don't have to be afraid of death, because death is just a temporary point in your life before you're welcomed home by God. And that again changed my view of death. Death wasn't simply the end of a life, it was the gateway to a new one, a bridge to the other side if it were. That didn't make it any less scary or foreboding, but it made me sort of appreciate it in a new way. So years went by and I wasn't thinking much about it anymore. I entered high school, and about that time I was beginning to write stories. I was beginning my writing journey. I was writing stories about brave heroes, big adventures. I remember I wrote Aces and Spades, a story about a pair of fighter pilots in an imaginary war. I wrote Written Stone, a small love story that I thought would be fun. And I even wrote the early drafts of Night Angel and Submerged, which I would go on to finish in college. But death was rather far from my mind at the time. But the more I grew and the more I learned about the world, the more I realized that death was always there. Be it a friend, an acquaintance, or even someone I didn't like, death was impacting them some way and somehow. I also began to ask questions about death. Can you resist death, or is it an unstoppable force? Is immortality even something one could potentially achieve? What is the most painful way to die? What is the most painless way to die? Does it even matter? Does death hurt? Is it really just like sleeping? I was asking a lot of questions about death, and I don't know if that was exactly healthy for me to do, but I was wondering a lot about it. But then, a new thought came to my mind, a thought I'd not had since I was a little boy in church. What if there was an angel of death? And now all those questions I was asking took on a brand new context. Of the ways you can die, which one does the angel of death prefer? What does the angel of death think about the concept of immortality? Is that an insult to him, or does he find it humorous? What does the angel of death look like? Are they a man, a woman, a child? Would they care? If they're an angel, couldn't they just change it when they want to? How do they feel about murder versus natural death? Are they really just a skeleton in a dark robe, or are they made of flesh? Do they wear a dark robe? Do they carry a scythe, or do they carry a sword? Do they even carry a weapon? Are they an angel, or are they a demon? Are they wicked, or are they good? I was no longer asking about death as a concept, but as an entity, and that suddenly began to hit me in a brand new way. Who is death? While I was in college, those thoughts finally led me to write Death. But how? I didn't want to just make some random narrative about this, and that's when I read the book The Book Thief by Marcus Isaac. In the book, Death himself is the narrator of the story, and that's when inspiration struck me. A diary. What if Death himself had a diary? It all started innocent enough. I had a page on DeviantArt where I posted some of my stories, so I started uploading there. I would write an entry and post it on DeviantArt, but as I wrote more and more, my audience were asking for Death's opinions about different eras in history and different individuals in history. I didn't mind that so much. It was content. I was giving people what they wanted to see, and that was fine. But a friend of mine pointed out, that's not death talking in those entries. It's you talking. You're using death kind of as a different name for yourself. So I had to backtrack and rethink the series because she was right. I had not been writing death, but I was writing for myself. So I thought and analyzed what I was missing. How do I capture who death is? How do I write him better? I was kind of at a loss. So I put the whole thing on pause for a while to try and figure out how to better write death. Then, as some of you may know, I suffered a few traumatic incidents and eventually I was diagnosed with depression. This led to occasional thoughts of suicide and just a general fear of the future. I didn't see a purpose in living, and I thought that it would be easier if I just didn't anymore. I was in this really dark place that I was truly at a loss for where to go in life. I was lethargic, I was paranoid, I was just sad. Always so really sad, and it didn't matter how many people were around me. I felt like I was alone. I felt like no one would care if I just stopped breathing. Death started to look more and more appealing. Now, eventually, I did start to get the help I needed, and while it's still a struggle that I fight with today, the depression, that dark time I went through suddenly opened my perspective in a different way. That sensation of hopelessness, loneliness, and sadness. It drew me back to that first thought I had as a kid. Is death sad? Is death lonely? So I found myself returning to the Death Diary series. But I wasn't writing what the audience asked for this time. I started over. I stepped back into that time I had. And I applied it to the world we live in and to the things we see in it. And I tried to see through the eyes of an entity who lived forever in that realm of loneliness, sadness, and hopelessness. An entity who was created from sin and whose existence is one surrounded by misfortune, fear, sadness, and pain. What does death think of this world? What memories does death have, and how does he feel about them? And I think what truly hit me the hardest was in my fourth entry when I wrote about death going to visit a little girl with leukemia. She was going to die and he was there for her. Now, I could have just wrote, that he talks about how bad leukemia is. He says that leukemia is really bad, it's awful, and we need to find a cure for it, and just wrap it up. But that's not what we did. That's not what I felt compelled to write. Instead, she woke up to see death right there with her, right next to her bed, and she spoke to him. And she asked what he was there for, and he said for her. And she said, you're going to take me away? Can mommy and daddy come too? No, not yet. And Death was moved by her innocence. And Death even talks about how he admires children because of their innocence. They don't look at death in the same way adults do. She said she was scared. She asked if he would hold her. He did. And for a brief moment, we took a peek into Death's world. A world that really doesn't have any happy endings, but quiet moments of compassion being shared, or quiet moments of sadness that we just need to embrace and accept, even in a way that one might not expect. This entry, the fourth entry, like I said, really seemed to capture what I wanted from this diary. A look into Death's world, his view of it, and how he approaches his job. From there, I wrote many more entries, each one exploring other instances and circumstances Death faces. Sometimes he comments on the beauty of a sunrise. Sometimes he contemplates his distaste for homicide and suicide. Other times he laments his own fears of humanity and his fears of isolation. I remember even writing how he dreams one day of being free of his burden and at last closing his eyes to just enjoy a nap, because he says he doesn't get to have that. I wrote about the Easter, how Jesus resurrected and how that was his greatest failure and yet humanity's greatest success. There were moments I really explored death and what he remembered, but not just from my own viewpoint, but from his viewpoint. The more I wrote Death, the more I felt like it wasn't just me writing a character, but as if Death were writing for me. Now, I'm not going to say that I was actually influenced by the angel of death or something that poetic or miraculous, like he just took over my body and just wrote what he wanted. Not that, no. But it didn't feel like it was me anymore when I wrote Death. I sincerely felt like I'd stepped into a new character or understanding. And in this, I felt like I'd actually truly come to appreciate death as an entity, as a character, as an individual. Again, this wasn't me just writing going, these are my thoughts with death signing underneath. This is someone else besides me. In an ironic way, death became more to me than just a fun character that I could use to exposit my own personal views on things, but he took a life of his own. He became a figure that I not only related to, but that I began to embody in my writing. And I fully plan to republish his book one day, the full book, not that earlier slop that I screwed up in the past, because I think death deserves better than that, at least the death that I created. I haven't written a new entry in a while for Death's Diary, but I feel like I really want to. I want to expand on the book, explore more with death. I want to see what philosophies he speaks on next, what events in life he has to share, and what thoughts he has to share on the world we live in today. You know, this is going to sound like a really ironic statement, but it's no exaggeration to say that death changed my life. Now there's a tagline for you right there. There were so many different things that I used to inspire me. Music for one thing, long walks and talks, that helped as well. But I think what really helped me write death was the recognition that there was something almost relatable in it. Like I said, when I was struggling, going through that dark time, that dark situation, I really felt like I could apply that situation to what death, if he was an entity, might go through. And lots of people who've read my Death Diary series tell me that they think it's really cool. They think it's really enjoyable. And I hope that they're telling the truth. I really do. I really enjoyed making that series and I'm enjoying writing it. But I wanted to share this video because I was thinking about that just the other day. I was thinking about going back to writing that series and adding more to it. And as I was contemplating these things, I just thought, I'd share this with you guys. I thought that I'd share with you guys how that all came to be, how I got that started, because it's such a fascinating story. But anyway, I know a lot of people won't watch this. If you honestly did watch the video all the way to this point, thank you so much for watching it, because I know that this isn't something that a lot of people are interested in. It's not something they're all going to want to click on. So I hope that you guys did enjoy what you heard. Probably won't make any money off of this, but you know what? At least I got to share with you guys something really cool. All right. That's all I have to say. Thank you guys for watching. I will see you in my next video. Take care.